Me and my wife recently moved out of a home that I can only describe as extremely creepy. The house caused so much anger and hatred. Whatever entity resides in the home is either menacing or pure evil. Even as soon as my wife moved into the home when she was a child. She told me a story of when she and her little brother were playing one night in his room. They were playing with a leapfrog-type device. She described in detail about how she was showing her brother how to use it, and it began to act strange. Strange sounds came out of it. Then, a man's voice began screaming from it. She said it was saying something about a list, something about making mistakes. Screaming and cursing until she turned it off. So let's fast forward some years. I met my wife a few years ago, and long story short, she got pregnant. Anyway, we decided that since it was the logical thing to do, I would move in with her. Sweet, no problem. At the time I worked the night shift from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This will be important later. After a few weeks of moving in, I noticed something strange about the house. The upstairs where we lived seemed menacing in a way. Like someone was in the other room waiting for you. At first, I brushed it off as just being nervous. New house, new life kind of thing. I also thought it might be from the steady work insomnia was causing me. As time went on, I began noticing more and more. Whenever the house should have been dead silent, things would happen. Footsteps up and down the hallways, knocks on doors, and sometimes I could swear I heard whispers. Being an avid believer in spirits, I wasn't particularly afraid, until things started getting dark. One morning as I was laying in bed, watching Netflix and hoping to fall asleep, I heard a rustling from the closet. It was just light enough in the room that you could make everything out. I saw nothing, and thought maybe it was just the fan. Then, something moved out of the corner of my eye, and as I looked at the closet, a dark ball moved from the closet to the bedroom door. It was about the size of a softball and moved about as fast as a person could to the door. Later into the week, my wife had gotten into the bad habit of sleeping with the closet light on. I blame myself for that one. I should have kept my mouth shut. So we were lying there talking about baby stuff, and I noticed the curtain that covered the closet started to move. My wife was curled into me facing my chest, and I was staring at the closet. As I kept watching, I saw what I can only describe as a tiny mist-like figure, not like white mist but slightly darker than the rest of the background, move out from the closet. It was maybe 3 feet tall and vanished as quick as it appeared. As soon as I began telling my wife what had happened, she felt a sharp pinch on her back. She didn't cry out or scream, she calmly turned around and shouted, "Get the hell out and leave us the hell alone." Too bad that didn't work. Now, let's fast forward. You're probably wondering, what else happened? Well, small stuff here and there for a while. Footsteps were regular. And I know some of you are probably saying, it's only the house settling, and I would agree. But not only did the footsteps stretch out the entire length of the 20-foot hallway, they sometimes were fast and rapid, and the knocks on the doors were very rhythmic. So, now the really scary stuff begins to happen. After this recent Christmas, things began to spark up to a new level. One day, I was sitting on my computer and my wife came into the room asking me what I needed from the store. The computer room was directly across from the bathroom. Our daughter's door was to the immediate left of that, and the stairs were to the right. I began telling my wife what I wanted. When she looked out the door and turned, well, I guess she saw something ghostly. Her eyes got big and her mouth dropped. She slowly turned toward me, and said that she just saw a man walk into our daughter's room. She begins describing what it looked like. It was about 6 feet tall, blackish, and only slightly translucent. While she's describing this, I walk out into the hallway and go into my daughter's room. Have you ever walked into a freezer, like the ones Walmart stocks ice cream in? That immediate chill is what I felt when I walked in there. There was nothing, of course, but as soon as we began walking out, a set of metal bed frames we had laying against the wall, for over a year I might add, slid down and fell to the floor. My wife turned back into the room and told whatever it was to get the hell out of our home. But it didn't, of course. January comes, and things really picked up before we moved out. The power got cut off during a sudden storm, and we were left in the dark for a night. My wife at this point wanted nothing to do with the home, and decided she wanted to stay at her dad's house. So we began packing her things for the night. I went downstairs and got my daughter loaded up in the car, and as I started walking back, my wife shot out of the door nearly in tears. I asked her what was wrong, and she only said simply, "I don't want to talk, close the door, let's go." The upstairs to the home is pitch black, even on the brightest day, due to the layout. So when the power is off during an overcast, you might as well be underground. My wife was in our room, gathering her things, with only a flashlight. As she was loading things into her bag, she heard someone walk down the stairs, down the hallway and right up against her back. She assumed it was me, but when she turned around she saw nothing but black. Not like darkness black. But imagine someone holding a black sheet in front of you, something like that. Even on the day we were moving out, things were happening upstairs. It was the worst I've personally ever felt it. Just dread and sorrow. My wife once again had something walk up on her, and heard knocks on the bedroom door while she was packing. We've gone back a few times to get a thing or two since we left in February. Every time it has been terrifying walking up the stairs. I'm just glad we moved out. That place truly had something twisted about it. I actually have stories which sound scarier when I tell them. But this story is the most terrified I have been in my life. The situation was scarier to me than any other story I could tell. This happened a bit over a decade ago, in the summer of 2006. First, a description of the house. We had a long driveway, about a quarter mile or so, living on almost 4 acres. We could see our neighbors easily, but were not close at all. When you get to the front door, it was a pair of double doors with most of the door being glass. About a 4-inch or maybe 6-inch wooden frame around all 4 sides, with a big window in each door. Plus narrow side windows to either side of the door, also starting about 4 inches to 6 inches up, and going to the same height as the windows in the door. Opening the doors, there are stairs going to the second floor right in front of you. Well, right in front of the left side door. To the right was a smallish formal living room. The stairs up were spacious planks of wood, so you could see through them to the other side into the informal family room. From the family room, immediately under the stairs to the second floor, was the stairs down into the basement. At the bottom of those stairs was a bedroom I used as my office. No need to describe the rest of the house for this story, though there was some oddities and spookiness that had happened in various other places inside. At this point, me and my wife were certain the house was haunted. We were almost sure at least 2, probably 3, and maybe even 4 different ghosts were there. They were not a constant presence, and it felt like 2 of them liked us both, and were generally benign or sometimes even beneficial. One seemed to like me and dislike my wife, and another was the opposite, and seemed to like her, and dislike me. The 2 nice ones may have been just one, who had different moods, or may have been the other 2, but was just sometimes okay with both of us, or, whatever it was, neither my wife, nor I ever seemed to feel more than 2 at a time, which is why we weren't sure how many there were. And we never saw any of them, only felt them and heard them. Again, leading to us not being certain if it was 2, 3, or 4 presences. Anyway, back to the story. Up until now nothing really bad had happened. And even this story doesn't sound super terrifying, however it did feel terrifying at the time. We had had random items disappear, or even reappear, heard noises, and mostly just could feel them at certain times and in certain places. If we hadn't talked to each other about it, I am sure we would have individually both passed it off as just our minds playing tricks on us. But once we talked about it, it became clear that neither of us was hallucinating, or if we were, it was shared hallucinations. Nevertheless, this evening, my wife was out of town, visiting some of her friends about a 90-minute drive away. However, she was staying the night, so I was set to be alone. I'm in my office working, and I hear a loud rumbling. My first guess is a delivery truck just pulled up on my driveway. It sounded like a big diesel engine. I started saving what I was working on and getting ready to go upstairs. And the noise got louder. By the time I was walking to the stairs up to the main level, it sounded like a semi, and I mean a big and loud semi, was in my driveway. Which has happened for some deliveries in the past, but I wasn't expecting anything like that, so it seemed exceedingly odd. As I headed up the stairs, it got even louder, to the point I was honestly considering if a helicopter might be landing in my yard, and why that would happen. The walls were vibrating slightly. Pictures bouncing against the walls, not wildly, but enough that it was an audible and visible addition to the rumbling. At this point I was almost halfway up the steps. I started to move faster and looked back over my shoulder, through the floating steps above me, and out the window in the door. My view wasn't perfect, because of the angle and the steps blocking a portion of it. But I saw black shoes, black or dark brown socks, and brown work pants. My mind immediately registered, oh, it's the UPS guy. What could he possibly be driving that is so loud? And I turned back forward and dashed up the rest of the steps. As I got to the top and was about to turn around the guardrail to move to the front door, two things hit me. First, I should not have been able to see shoes. There was 4-inch or 6-inch of wood at the base of the door, and at least another inch or 3 from the bottom of the door to the top of my front porch. Second, as soon as that hit me, I literally felt as the sound exploded into silence. I know that sounds weird to say in that way, but that is the only way I can describe it. It was like a pressure wave went through me, without moving me though, and it was eerily quiet. There was no buzzing appliances, no bugs outside, no critters of any kind, no noise from the fairly busy roads half a mile away, nothing, and the electricity, including all lights, went off in that same instant. So I was left with an ominous silence and in the dark, with only a bit of twilight from stars and a sliver of a moon lit up the entrance to the house. I found my cell phone in my hand, not sure when I had pulled it out of my pocket, and I called my wife, freaked out. I was moving out the very same front door I had just seen someone outside of. Looking back, I wonder why I didn't run to the back door. The house was dark, but I knew the way and it wouldn't have been difficult to navigate, but I was just filled with a primal dread. It was coming from within, as well as without. It felt like I was walking through a cloud of fear. So I ran to the door, threw it open, and went to check the breaker panel, outside the house. It was all turned on, no breakers flipped, the power shouldn't be off, but it was. My wife answered halfway down the drive, and I managed to tell her what had happened by the time I reached the end. I kept her on the phone. I don't remember what either of us said, as I walked for about 10 miles. I wanted to be far away from the house, and never even thought of going into the garage to get in my car. When I had time to collect myself, about 10 miles later, I walked back to the house. First thing I noticed was that it was lit up. Every light in the house was on, even though I hadn't had any of the upstairs lights on, besides the porch light and the family room light, before the power had gone out. And the front door was shut and locked, even though I had left it open. No neighbors would have gone in, and even if they had, there was no way they could have locked up behind themselves. Luckily, I had my keys in my pocket. I unlocked the door and went inside. All felt normal. Maybe even a bit emptier than normal. I went down to my computer, and it had indeed been restarted and warned me about not shutting down properly, just as if the power had been out. Luckily, I had saved before getting up all those hours ago, and I shakily went back to work. I was freaked out for a couple of weeks, but nothing else odd happened for a while. Not even the normal oddness. A month or so later, the house was broken into and vandalized, and a lot of our stuff was stolen. Over the course of the next few months, with everything that had been going on, but mainly due to the vandalism and burglary, my wife and I moved to a new place. It has been sold at least twice since then. I haven't kept close tabs on it for a while. I have no idea if the new owners had any supernatural experiences or not. I did drive by it about 5 years back, and noticed a lot of fixing up had been done to the place. Anyway, nothing else to say about it really. It doesn't sound all that scary to tell, but nothing comes close to that night for the sheer amount of terror I felt. So, this happened about 15 years ago when my grandfather passed away. In my culture, the dead are cremated and there are elaborate ceremonies performed. The body was carried by people, while chanting the name of a Hindu god, after it has been cleaned, clothed, and some ceremonial colors put on it. I was never very close to my grandfather. I barely remember ever having much to talk with him about, but my parents say I used to talk to him a lot as a child. Anyway, when he died, I didn't really know much about him other than that he was the patriarch of the family, and everybody respected him. I was barely 10 years old then, and was supposed to stay at an aunt's house. Sneaky that I was, I managed to follow my mother when she left from my grandfather's house, unaware that I was a few steps behind her. Anyway, the ceremony starts. There's a lot of crying, and soon 4 people, including my father, my uncles and someone I can't remember, carry the body on top of a structure made of bamboo and wood. They chant throughout the way. Nobody noticed that I was following them. They reached the cemetery. There's a lot of crying and I got bored standing at a distance. It's almost dusk. I sit down on a nearby platform. Weirdly, I would later come to know that it is sort of a memorial for the deceased. Sometime between all this happening, I fall asleep. Hours go by, and when I wake up there is no one, just the last flames burning through pieces of wood. I panic. I look around to see if there's anyone near, but there's no one. I start running towards the pyre, hoping perhaps some of my relatives might spot me by the fire and get hold of me. Again, no one. I start crying, looking around to see if I can find my way to the street. The cemetery was on the outskirts of the town, and it was huge to my tiny mind. Rows after rows of those memorials I mentioned earlier. It's almost dark and I can hear animals howling at a distance. While all this is happening, I have a creepy feeling that I am being watched. It sends a shiver down my spine, and to this day, I don't remember ever being so scared like this time. It was such a dark and nauseating feeling, a sense of impending doom. I cry louder and start running. Little did I know that I was running deeper into the cemetery, farther from the road that would take me home. I reach the edge of the open ground and catch my breath near the tree line. I can hear faint voices coming from beyond the silhouette of the trees in front of me. Perhaps someone might be returning after gathering wood from there. I'm again hit with this nauseating feeling and it's stronger now. To top it all, every time I would walk or run, it felt like I could hear footsteps. Like someone right behind me. I turned around several times, yet found no one. I was so afraid at that point that I thought I might die. I took a leap of faith and ran towards the trees. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, and it seemed like whoever it was came near, almost at arm's length. Like they could just reach out and catch hold of me. I am audibly sobbing and shouting for help. There's barely any light, but I remember hearing people in the distance. Suddenly, I'm in a clearing and see there's a community pond with a bathing area. I can see some people in my family and I ran towards them. No matter how loud I tried to cry, there was no sound coming out of my mouth. Finally, an ant saw me and ran towards me. The last thing I remember before fainting is a hand on my shoulder, and my body almost freezing on the spot. I was sick for a week after that. I also experienced nightmares for years, and in general stopped going to my grandfather's house or even the town. To this day I find it difficult sleeping in the dark, and sometimes wake up with a cold sweat, and a creepy feeling on my shoulder, like someone was holding on to me.